Good. Well, one thing that's not formally considered during part of the process is the effects of climate change and extreme weather. A 2019 Pentagon analysis found that of all the services, the Air Force's base infrastructure is most at risk for climate change threats such as recurrent flooding, drought, desertification, wildfires, thawing permafrost. Do you think it's worth making that another factor in the strategic basing decision-making process?
I'm not aware of the extent to which it is or isn't at the moment, but it should be a consideration, absolutely. Climate change implications affect costs, they affect mission performance and other things. So it should be included in my view as one of the things that's looked at.
But before I do that, I want to briefly ask you about the strategic basing process. This is the formal process the Air Force uses to decide where to station new aircraft, like the F-35 or the KC-46 that you've been talking about. The Air Force has gone to admirable lengths to ensure that when it's choosing installations for these aircraft, issues like the quality of education available near a base and licensure reciprocity are a big part of the consideration. And this is important because the quality of schools available for their children and the ability of spouses to obtain jobs and sustain careers are critical issues that impact service members' quality of life. Excuse me. So, Mr. Kendall, can you commit to ensuring that the quality of education and licensing reciprocity are indeed factored into the strategic basing process going forward?
Thank you, Senator Warren. I have lived in military housing. It's been a while, but I know exactly what that's like and what some of the considerations are. And I actually applaud what the Air Force has done, as I understand relatively recently, to take into account quality of life for families and issues like licensing and the support that the community gives to people. So the answer to your question is absolutely. The process that you described is a several-step process. It gets to a small number of candidates, and then it compares them over several factors, cost, mission support, but also quality of life, and it's really the ability of the community to support a military family. So I think that's all very important and all should be taken into account.
If I can, I want to get in a question about military housing. We've all heard the stories for military families about the deplorable conditions of on-base privatized housing. The companies that were hired by DoD escaped accountability by fudging their numbers and sweeping complaints under the rug. My office still hears from military spouses that the problem is not getting any better and that landlords are not following the laws that Congress passed that are designed to protect the military tenants. So let me ask, if confirmed, will you commit to using all the tools available to hold landlords and private companies accountable to make sure that they build and maintain quality housing for our service members and ensure that they are not profiting off substandard housing?
Senator, again, I've lived in military housing. I know how important it is to families to have quality housing, and it's a fundamental obligation of someone who would be confirmed potentially in a position like the Secretary of the Air Force. So the short answer to your question is yes. But what we need to do is have sound contracts. We need to enforce those contracts and ensure that people get the quality housing that they deserve.
On the subject of climate change, there is no way to address the climate crisis without confronting DoD's role as the largest consumer of fossil fuel on the planet. Will you commit to using all the tools and authorities at your disposal to make the Air Force more climate resilient and to reduce its carbon footprint whenever possible?
Yes, Senator, it's an all of the above type of problem, and there are a number of things that can be done. The Air Force is impacted by geopolitical changes even that affect the threats that we face. But it's also affected by extreme weather events that affect our bases. The Air Force, among the DoD, which itself, as you've pointed out before, is a very large consumer of fossil fuels, is the highest consumer because of the large fleet of aircraft that the Air Force operates. So there are a number of things that can be done there. Ms. Yu mentioned lighter weight materials is one thing. I'm aware of some technology programs on propulsion that would reduce the consumption of fuel substantially and also increase operational capability. So it's an all of the above problem that needs to be addressed on a great many fronts simultaneously.